Hello, everybody. This is a session where we will be discussing wave of new music. The guests that we have today are extremely talented composers in film and television. And since the title of the session is Wave of New Music, we are going to look into what music in film and TV has been in the past 10 years or so. What has been new and what has been their contribution to it, and what are the changes that they have gone through in industry practices, as well as the changes that they have witnessed in musical approach altogether. My first question to everybody in this panel is that what have been the primary changes in background music's scoring or scoring for film and TV, which includes songs as well, which is what Anand Bhaskar did for Mirzapur. So what have the changes been like in terms of industry perception, in terms of fans? Fans today are more a lot interested in background score. They demand that scores be released on YouTube and on streaming apps, which is a good thing. And secondly, what have been the changes in musicality of background score? One change that I have noticed is that today's scores do not seldom have very sweeping melodies. They're more texture based. That is something that I have noticed. So I'd like to, whoever wants to go first, you can start.
Okay. I mean, the first big change I think with scores that's been more recent, especially with OTT platforms coming in, is songs aren't part of the marketing. So if there's a song, it's there because there is a narrative reason for a song, which was something that was happening in general with film. There was a trend towards some of that happening with certain kinds of films. But in series, at least the series we've worked on, they haven't really been any songs. So that contributes to a change both in terms of the musicality of the score and the way you approach the score, because normally what tended to happen is songs would take usually quite key moments in the narrative arc of a series or a film. So when the score is doing that, then you have a chance to interweave themes. Themes in the score can grow within the journey of the score itself and not come from the song. And you also have a chance to then interconnect and build a more cohesive whole with the score. So that I think helps. That helps a lot. And also, there's been a change. I think it's some of the outside of the more very independent film festival kind of films that we've done, but films that have an outlook to be commercial, to try and get some sort of commercial success, in terms of larger audiences. There's been less talk in the room of trying to explain things through the score as much, where the score is seen as like a tool to make sure a point is getting across that wasn't getting across earlier. I don't want to say dumbing down, but just making things more, not spoon-fed, but super clear. That conversation seems to have left the room a little bit, at least in our experience, with the series we've done and with somewhat more commercial films of late.
Well, there've been changes for sure, really changes, good and bad. The good ones are that we have all, the likes of me who thrive off of watching things at the end of the day. Even if you're working till 4, you have to watch this one episode or just one film. And the OTT platforms have kind of become the microcosm, and the it's you are with your laptop or your phone and you're watching things. It's more available. I mean, the world is thriving off of that. So putting your music out there through these platforms have obviously been a big method of speaking out, a big method of expressing, and more people have been able to listen to them. We've got a chance to develop the themes and the music over series of episodes. And it's been a playground. For the good things, it's been a great playground. OTT platform has led to, it's a new thing and everyone's watching it. People have access to it. People can listen to the score. There is an opening music, which kind of summarizes the entire series for you. For some series, at least, they have opening music. So yeah, and you get a lot of playground, a lot of canvas to express, to paint. Although every episode is like a movie, you still have, you can develop with the characters. You see them going. You can, it's very, very. You can sink your teeth into it. So in terms of not so good things, I think the whole just how the world is disbalanced. Anything good becomes disbalanced. So there's so much of it now. There's a lot of content. So there is a rush, there is a pressure, there is a lot of need to put things out in as quickly as possible, as fast as possible, rather than putting it out as well as possible, if I may say so. So those are some of the bad things. So that you have to kind of go with the rush, go with the time. You don't have much breathing space, but a lot has changed. Yeah.
Right. I would like to touch upon something that I said in the introduction, and that is also something that Aloka said in an interview. So Aloka, what Aloka was saying was that since she's classically trained, she really likes good melodies. And as I was saying, in what I've noticed in movie scores in the past 10 years post social network, or maybe around that time, scores have become very texture based, and the sweeping melodies that we quickly come to mind when we think John Williams or when we think Thomas Newman, stuff like that seldom happens now. I mean, if you look at the score of The Joker, which won the Oscar, there I can't recall any clear melodies. It was mostly mood music. So, as score composers, what is your take on this? Is has the time for good melodies in score, has it gone? Is it a phase? And what do you look at this trend, if we can call that a trend? What do you think of it?
I don't think it's era specific, really. I think it's project specific. So for example, Aloka's score for Sacred Games like took us all by fire. Like we were like, who's done this? Who's done this? And it was all very, very subtle and orchestral because the script demanded it. Naren, I'm sorry, I've not seen the series, so I'm not like aware of your
That's
work
fine.
yet. But I'm sure you agree that it all depends on the project. It doesn't have to be. I mean, you can't say for sure that something like a John Williams will not happen now. I mean, if the project demands it, if it's so there's a new movie coming called Shamshera, I think, and I think it's periodic. So I'm sure there are going to be rousing background scores, and there's going to be a lot of, orchestral BGM with lots of ostinatos and lots of string section work, lots of horn section work. So it really is dependent on what you're working on and what the script demands off of you. So, I mean, you guys can add to it.
Thinking about what Alokananda was saying is that it's interesting that when we have been given some freedoms, we found great moments to sort of really play with, actually bringing back those big, strong thematic ideas, and sometimes when we really want to. That's been quite a nice freedom, I think, to say now's the moment for this. Bang, or not. What's the gray in between them, and then just move away from it for many minutes at a time or whatever. But so I think that's there in melodic terms. I don't think.
Yeah, I agree with what Anand said as well about it being quite project specific. But I agree with you, Devarsi, that there has been a trend towards scores that are more textural. But I think that has to do with the kind of narrative. There are these sort of narratives that have an ambiguous score. There's not really one clear theme. There's a multitude of them. There's not really one clear narrative. I think if you look at older films like Star Wars or Forrest Gump or these kind of more singular stories about one very clear Bildungsroman or one very clear arc, those films tend to lend themselves to a very strong, clear melodic theme. You look at a show like Succession, for example, on HBO, that has pretty strong, very clear melodic writing, and that I think works because again the script there is almost like Shakespearean.
Correct.
It's like this drama of like these people, this family pitted against each other. But I think if you look at something like Chernobyl, for example, which has the same composer as The Joker and is far more of a textural score, there what the score needed to do was not some grand melody that spoke for everything, but more like the radioactive, gases coming out of that plant, the fallout. It was that feeling and that absolute sense of dread. Yeah. And I think that is sometimes more communicated more through something more atmospheric, because that's what the film is also doing. It's trying to create an atmosphere rather than a singular clear thing,
Aloka,
And I
would you
think
want
that's
to? Okay,
sorry.
sorry. You were
Yeah,
saying
I
something.
mean, sorry, no, I think they've summarized everything. I completely agree with Anand, as in it's not time specific. I think
Mm.
it could be taste specific. There might be just like things trend at certain times. It could be taste specific to certain groups of people who want to listen to, who are grooving to certain things more than the other things at that time. But I don't think it is time specific. I mean, texture, orchestral textural music have happened a long time back. I mean, one of my oldest electronic music that I heard, Tim Hecker and Arthur Russell, which was just a cello, just creating atmospheric music in layers and just textures through an acoustic instrument. So, and in present times, really good melodic scores in films that I have seen have also happened. So I don't think that it's not like melody is gone and there's just a trend of electronic texture. I think it's very script oriented, just like Naren and Anand and Benedict mentioned. It's what the director wants. It's what the story wants.
Mm.
You could say that life has moved forward and tools and gadgets are more and more available. So it could be also the medium through which you're making music. But overall, I don't think it's time specific. It's what the script demands, what the story demands, and it's what you can do with your, whoever instrument, somebody's voice can be their instrument. So however you want to morph it and use it, whether it's unadulterated or whether you want to morph it or play with it or do whatever you want and make it textural, it's up to the composer and it's up to the script and the story and the director.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, just one thing I wanted to add. I agree with all of that. I think, though, that there is a larger trend, and that's not really driven by the composers as much as it's driven by the kind of films that are happening and the kind of stories we're telling. And those stories demand more
Right.
textural work.
Like Uncut Gems background score is bizarre. Like
I haven't
it's
seen
not.
that. I've heard great things about it. I haven't
It's
seen
really
it.
good.
bizarre.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's bizarre. It's not textural, it's not orchestral, but it's somewhere in the middle of 80s synth wave and then some melody and then some drones.
Oh,
It's just weird. It's just weird. And
I loved it.
it's not even like back in the mix. Like there are scenes where it just
It's
goes
so
on
good.
for like 5 minutes
Yeah.
and they're talking, there's dialogues, but the music is there like with the dialogues.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So I think it's all, so like Aluka said, it also has to do a lot with the director's sensibility as well, along with the taste and everything. So yeah, like anyway, I think I'm repeating everybody's points.
my next question is about songwriting and score writing. So all four of you have written. I don't think Anand has, but the three of you have written both songs and both also scores for different projects. Anand has done the songs for Mirzapur. My question is, both needs very different skill sets as musicians. Can you talk about how you apply yourself to these different ways of making music and how one process differs from the other process?
Naren and Benedict, go for it. I'm curious to know your process first.
Me too.
You just sort of
I
crack on.
yeah.
Yeah,
No,
you just
actually,
sort of-
I was exactly. I was about to
Yeah.
touch upon something Bennett's teacher told him. Ultimately, I think it's a teacher, right? You've told me about this. Ultimately, you write what you want to hear. You know.
Yeah.
And
composition tutors. Yeah, that's right.
yeah, and I actually don't see it as a very different skill set. I see
not at all,
sometimes
yeah.
you approach a score, a cue, and it's actually been often a part of a conversation with the director or producer where you say like, we need to approach this part of the score like you're writing a song. It needs the same kind of structural thinking.
yeah.
It needs the same kind of melodic thinking. It's just obviously there's not going to be any words, and it doesn't quite have the same thing in some ways. But
I mean, maybe it's either, sometimes there's a focus on the structural kind of elements that need to make up verse and chorus and bridge ideas and stuff. But compositionally, I think, like I was saying before, with that sort of, we want to jump on a melody here, you kind of go into a song head first into what wouldn't it be cool if we did this?
Correct.
And it might be a complete disaster, or it might land in some way. You know what I mean? It'd be like, but you sort of, I don't know. It's interesting with songs. I don't know. I think we come at it a bit the same way with score and Naren, in the same way.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's not that different.
In fact, we've approached some scores like Gurgaon, for example. It has the song and score have a very fluid relationship. In fact, a lot of the score we treated as like sort of like a broken up song. And there are many scores as well where in Sonchiria, for example, where we've taken folk songs as an inspirational basis for the score. So I don't see them as like disparate or different.
Sometimes I think in the composing hat, coming again from a classical background, it sometimes feels a lot of fun and potentially like I'm misbehaving to get into a song. Because I'm not, you know, I mean, from the classical thing, I'm not really allowed to do this. But what if I did an AC/DC thing right now? Brilliant.
Yeah.
You know? And then actually, that's what we need.
So adding to that, actually, so when I was asked to write songs based on various situations. So my goal was to write full songs and not write like 50-seconders, because I hate writing small songs. So I told them I'll write full songs. Then you guys decide where to put elements or songs without vocals, wherever you feel they're applicable. And when you see the series, if you hear the songs first and then you see the series, you'll realize that quite a few of the scenes have used maybe like a bass line from a song, or maybe the song without the vocals going on in the background, because it kind of accentuates what's happening in the scene. And a lot of the times what happens is, now the things have changed, right? What the actors are not depicted lip syncing the songs. In fact, the song is either playing in the scene, the song is playing on a speaker system or in a home theater or something like that, and these guys are dancing to the song. So that could be anything. So that's how the song is sort of included in the narrative, as opposed to how it has happened in Bollywood, like for several years, where the actors just break into a song on a road and instruments start playing on their own and backup dancers come from somewhere. All that has stopped now. So I think that's how directors are using songs as well now. Sometimes as entirely as songs, and sometimes just elements of the songs here and there, to maybe like give it like a prelude to when the actual songs really comes in the scene.
One thing which about Mirzapur is that, as you said, the songs aren't used as they are. Like the entire length of it is not used. The bits and pieces are used. Sometimes, like you said, a bass line is used somewhere, and then later the song appears and all of that. And I've often thought of with many soundtracks or many scores which I've listened to before the movie released, for example, and I really liked them. And then when I go see the series, I don't know if it's reasonable for me to think like this, but when I go see the series or the movie in question, I'm kind of disappointed that thing wasn't used properly. Maybe because genuinely the story or narrative did not demand it. Sometimes the reason is genuine, and sometimes I think the guys just did not know how to use this music. But that's just me. My question.
Just add to that, it can also purely be a time structural thing, that the score was done and the songs were done in a different thing with marketing. Correct. You, as a score composer, maybe you had access to scratches of the song, and the final version of the song that you hear with all the melodic bits added on happened much closer to the release.
No,
the film was already done.
Even changes in the edit matter a lot. Coming to that, Dev, one of the songs that I wrote for Mirzapur season 2 was a song. It was a folk song called Lalanwa. And Mihir, the director, and I, when we were working on the song together, he said, let's add like a hip hop element to this song, which nobody will expect. Nobody. And what ended up happening was that it starts with this old lady saying, "Arey oh rahua, gati kyun nahi ho?" like in that old lady voice. So it's the singer of the song. She's only like imitated an old UP lady. And then when the folk element, when the people are just about settling into the folk element, there's a bass line and there's a proper hip hop drum groove that comes. But it's not shown in the show. But initially the plan was to have the folk song come, and then the main character, which is Beena, she says a dialogue, and then the credits roll. And when the credits roll, the hip hop element comes there. But the edit changed. So because the edit changed, after her final dialogue, there were two other scenes. So they couldn't, they did thought that adding that to the credit sequence would not make any sense anymore. So sometimes the edit also changes, and like you can't really do about it. What works best for the narrative and the storytelling is what matters at the end of the day. You know, music is a support function, and we can't always uh, expect them to change the edit for the music. The music needs to change for the edit. I mean, that's just my opinion.
That would be really cool, by the way, if it happened the way it was imagined.
Yeah,
Would
yeah,
be
yeah.
very
In fact,
cool.
so whenever I would write finish a song, I would get the scene and I would score the scene with the song. So that is how I had scored the ending. But then when it went on the final edit table, I think they must have made some structural changes, like Naren said, to the story, or how the scenes flowed. Like there was a bunch of other scenes that I've seen, but they've not made it to the show. Uh, and a few tracks that I had used to score those scenes didn't happen eventually because they were cut out of the story entirely.
Would you want to add something, Benedict, Aloka?
No, I just, I mean, I agree with both of them in terms of what Anand said. Even as a composer, you don't have a lot of control because of technicalities and because it's a film and it's the film directors, the producer, the editor. So things get edited, things get changed. So you can't always, but that's the game. That's the process. I mean, not the game that you don't have control over it. And in terms of technicalities of what Benedict said, songs and score, I personally, again, I don't think, I think very few of us have written for lip sync songs. I have written only two, which have been caricatures. So songs have also been used as a score. So the approach has been absolutely similar. I mean, there isn't much to get cracking. You just start and see where it goes and see what gets accepted and see what doesn't get accepted. But personally, I kind of write the accompaniment first and then the melody at times. So sometimes by fluke, songs happen quickly. So that's something personal. I don't think it's generic. It's something personal that's happened to me, that sometimes with a song, and I don't really follow patterns. My songs are it really doesn't have any structure at times. It's like a ballad. It just starts and ends. Sometimes I don't even feel like putting a chorus or anything. So with songs, if I have the accompaniment written out, the melody comes easier. And sometimes when it's done, it's done. I'm like, oh, okay, the song is done. With scores, yeah, I'm done. With scores, I've rarely had a moment where, oh my God, it's done. Scores are like, even after the movie or the show is out, I'm still thinking that maybe it's unfinished. And so by fluke, something have been done sooner for me. But otherwise, the approach is exactly the same. It's an approach to score something, to highlight something, to underline something.
Benedict?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree. I think that I personally, I think the element of I think it can be quite refreshing to be challenged with making a song in that sense, because I think it can reignite an element of risk, because sometimes you have to think in quite a different way to find something. Well, we need to do something here, which is going to be this. Okay, so I think that's quite that makes me think a little differently, perhaps. But that's quite what I found being quite interesting in our stuff, is when you take that way of thinking back into the score, it can sometimes kind of reshape and redefine elements of what the score becomes eventually, by saying, okay, and you can really throw a curveball if it's somewhere in between, if it's not exactly like you say a lip sync kind of big sudden song number, but it's something which is in there and completely takes a tangent in scoring terms as well. So suddenly, so I think that's a really interesting tool in some ways, which we don't always get to explore. And that's what I was saying before about the sort of the idea of are we misbehaving because like we have to sort of jump in feet first and not really care. In that, that's quite a useful thing, I think, at times. It's very exciting, and scoring is very exciting, but it's sort of sometimes when you're charged with kind of finding a song idea, you do just have to sort of think or act quite differently briefly or something like that. And I like that process. It's, yeah.
Before I move on to a very interesting film musically that Naren has worked on, it's The Disciple. I want to talk about misbehaving with music. A very straight question. Are Indian filmmakers musically adventurous? And how do they react to unconventional music? Now, most of the filmmakers that you guys have worked with are more or less, trying to push boundaries and all of that.
Yeah.
So usually music has been like out there till a limit. But in general, what has been your perception of the film and television industry in terms of the kind of independence they give you? Are they looking forward to very new ideas? And actually, Anand said in one interview, and I'll touch upon that point later. He was saying that India is a country where, because of film songs, because of this culture of film songs, the musicians here can make music in any genre, rock. Just one musician alone, one composer alone can make a rock song, electronic song, whatever. So actually, if that is the case, that should allow for more interesting music, which is unfortunately not the case. But going back to the question I was asking, are Indian filmmakers musically adventurous, and how do they react to unconventional stuff? If you throw them, like, what do you think of this?
I think it's a very existentialist question there. It's really...
Yeah, it
Sorry, Anand.
depends. David, depends on the filmmaker. Like really depends on the filmmaker. So I've met filmmakers who've formally studied filmmaking. I've met filmmakers who've moved from ad filmmaking to feature filmmaking, and I've also met like filmmakers who call themselves filmmakers, but they were originally line producers. So uh, so there are people who've come to me expecting ki I want two remixes, one song like Tum Hi Ho, one song like Hai Dil Hai Mushkil. Not joking. This is verbatim.
No.
That
I've been there.
that has happened to me. Uh, I've also worked with a filmmaker. I can actually take his name. Bheja Fry's director,
Sagar
Sagar
Balaji.
Balari. Sagar Balari. I really enjoyed working with him. So I did the title track of a web series called Parivar on Hotstar, uh, and so the series is set in UP, and so the first track I gave him was full harmonium, dholak, and like Kajarare type vocals. And he said, "No, I'm not looking at something like this. I want something completely unexpected." So I asked him, "What do you like to listen to?" He's like, "I am a trance guy." He said, "I like trance, I like EDM, I like drum and bass." I was like, so drum and bass, the moment he said drum and bass, wahi atak gayi meri sui. I was like, wait, let me quickly open up a session and play you something. I added some harmonium to it, and the title track became like a folk track going into a drum and bass groove with rock style vocals. And he loved it. So this really depends on the exposure the filmmaker has had uh, to music, to the content they watch themselves. So like in art, there is this thing called art appreciation in every art school. You have this art appreciation module where you are subjected to various forms of art so that you appreciate the nuances of each form. And I feel that appreciation comes from consistent listening and consistently watching and absorbing content and media in various forms. And some filmmakers, unfortunately, have not had that exposure, which is why, they want to do what works, right? So there was a time for the last 1 year, year and a half, where remix has worked. And And the filmmakers shouldn't really be blamed for it. Neither should be the labels. I think who needs to be blamed for it is the audience that consumes that music, because the audience has completely stopped expecting new things from us as composers. They've completely stopped. Like, I'm talking about commercial music, Aloka, Benedict, and Naren. I'm not talking about score consumers.
No.
The audiences that consume background score are actually, I feel, musically a little more exposed to what's happening. But people who consume commercial music, they're not the same as the consumers of commercial music back in the 60s and 70s, where there were different time signatures to songs, where there were complex chord structures to songs, where there were amazing melodies to songs, because music was not available on your phone. It was not available on your palm. So you had this thing कि आप डैड के ब्रीफकेस से 100 रुपए चुरा के 125 रुपए की कैसेट लेने जाते थे, and you used to listen to the entire album because you had that need to explore new music. That's dying, that's dead, really, you know. And because of that, the labels and filmmakers have to sort of pressure composers into making remixes or songs that work technically. So that has happened with me as well. And obviously adventurous filmmakers have also approached. I mean, I'm not giving you a definitive answer. I know this is a very uh, sort of a balanced answer, but that's what it is. And I'm sure like the other three have also met people from all walks of life.
Right.
Yeah, Aloka, you were saying something about existentialism.
Oh. No, I'm a kind of a Debbie the Downer.
Please
I
go
don't want
ahead.
to be the downer, but coming from a dark, morbid state of mind, we all can't always be happy and technical, and can't have a rhinoceros skin. This trend of thicken your skin that's been passed on from composers to composers, that you have to survive. If the only way to survive is to thicken your skin and all of that. So I'm going into more of a personal um philosophical angle, I suppose, that one wonders, a composer wonders at a time, why did I start doing this in the first place? Because what made you compose? Why are you composing? Are you composing for yourself? Are you composing for people? Would you still compose if nobody appreciated you? Would you compose if you were the last man on earth, apocalypse, and would you still perform a piece of piano if there's no audience? Are you going to give all your control of happiness to people only if you appreciate or write something good about my score? Will I be happy? So there are all of these questions in terms of freedom, in terms of I'm not a composer, I'm a film music composer. So thereby, quite naturally, yes, I have met directors who've given a lot of freedom. I think we all have been very lucky to work with people who have kind of pushed us, pushed our boundaries, given us a lot of opportunities to experiment. But there is always a but, where somewhere, even as composers, you are not. It is not about you freely expressing yourself. You're still, or I at least, you still have to bubble wrap your heart and your head when you write something, and you still have to measure it. You still have your invisible pair of scissors, and you're measuring and cutting everything, tailoring it to the need for someone, because it's for someone. It's not yours at the end of the day. You're raising somebody else's baby. You cannot be your baby as much as you want it to be yours. So there is that thing. There is it's great that we've all worked with film directors who've been experimental and pushed us. And then personally, I also feel that there is always going to be a giant hole in my heart about I wish it was my call at times. I wish I could freely finish writing this. I could add the cadenza, or I could do my own cadenzas, and do something that I want and have it accepted. But then that's very idealistic. I understand how utopian that is. That's what I mean. The control is not all yours.
I have a very positive thing to say about music consumers now, in respect to what Anand said, that on the one hand there are score consumers, on the other hand there are commercial music consumers. So but before that I will want to go to Naren and Benedict. um as far as I know, and we have done the long interview before, but as far as I know, you guys have mostly worked with very out there filmmakers. But have you ever had this kind of like bizarre demand from any filmmaker like Anand did with make a tum hi ho, make a this or that, whatever? But have those things come to you?
I mean, they've come maybe on certain projects more from after they're done. They may have needed a song for marketing. So it's come with that. We need an item number. It needs to have a hook line. We need to crack those two lines. That if those two lines work, then the whole song is sorted. And then those hook lines tend to come with a reference, a bouquet of references of whatever's been doing, well in the last couple months or years.
Yeah.
That's happened. I've worked on TV, some TV stuff. Whether it's advertisements or themes. I did one theme for, I did one track where the initial reference was from Radiohead's Kid A, and the reference it ended up with when it went up all the upper echelons of management was Muni Badnaam. So,
How is that possible? I want to know the trajectory. What were the steps?
Well, it was basically a director's really ambitious attempt to do something new, smashed by the higher upper management. Nobody. That's not gonna that won't track. I mean, ultimately, the director managed to end up with something, that they were happy with. But it was just funny to observe over the course of like a good several months what the creative journey was. But coming back to the initial question of whether directors are open to unconventional music, I think it's quite like Aloka at first said, it's quite layered. It depends on several things. It depends on the project first. Sometimes a project doesn't need unconventional music. If you're doing a romantic comedy and you want to sell a certain kind of not sell is a bad word. You want to share a certain kind of emotion with people. You need a shared language of music that's happened before, and you need to touch upon that for that music to really make that character or that emotion make sense. The other is sometimes more practical. Sometimes it depends on when you've been involved in the project. You may be involved with a project that's been in its gestation or through an edit process for years. And a director and editor have had reference music that may be unconventional from an outside perspective, but they've sat with that for so long that it's become just fused with the picture.
They've lived with it.
Yeah, and then it's quite hard to separate that. So that doesn't mean that may not close down, that may you have to work within that language as a composer, so that's a different shade of whether you can really do something from your own mind that may have been a completely unconventional choice. And the other is also, sometimes it's a function of time. If you have a couple of weeks to put out a score, it's quite hard to say, okay, I'm going to break every word or musical score, storytelling here. Obviously, you try and do things as quick as creatively as you can. But in those cases, you can't really. It's difficult to break the mold and say, for this film, I'm going to tailor make something that is completely new and never been heard before. Apart from that, we've been quite lucky to meet a lot of directors who are very open. But also, sorry, just to add, a director may have, film is ultimately a director's medium. So a director may have a very unconventional choice or maybe hearing an unconventional kind of music in their head, but want something within that world. So you have to do something, maybe do something unconventional, but within the sort of jigsaw piece that they've left for you,
So adding to that, actually, so Gulzar Saab once, I think, said in one of his interviews or one of his print interviews, I don't remember, where he said that a lot of lyricists make the assumption of thinking that they are poets and that they will write poetry, and it's the composer's job to sort of fashion a song out of it, right? But what they fail to realize is that the lyricist sort of needs to work with the composer's vision and write lyrics that may have the potential to also be poetic, but they need to serve the purpose of the song, right? I feel that's the same function that a commercial composer has with respect to the director. Like Naren said, at the end of the day, it is the director's vision, and I personally feel that I'm sort of reporting to the director, and I would want to do what I want to do, but also keep in mind that his sensibilities and his understanding of the thing, understanding like his basically vision for the film is met. But let's also not forget that it's not just the director who takes the final call. There are just so many people. There are like 15, 20 people taking the call. Not even funny. I've worked on a project with Aloka, by the way, which had like 15 people taking the call.
Right.
So and it was one of the most fun songs I've sung on. But well, so the whole idea is that there are so many people taking a call that if the director, if it was just left to the director, and if director had the final word, all of us would be putting out the best music we've ever written. Trust me, all of us. But that's not what happens at the end of the day. There is going to be one IIM or a Harvard graduate out there who's going to make management decisions and is going to say this doesn't work.
I don't know if I fully agree. I think there are directors who think can behave like that also.
I'm sorry?
I said I'm not sure I'd fully agree. I think there are directors who also think within that way, or have
They
very
do.
specific,
They do.
yeah,
They do.
or who
I'm
have
not
very
saying-
specific ideas of what they want that may not necessarily be unconventional.
Correct. And they find the composers they're comfortable working with.
Yeah,
Or the
yeah.
composers who are comfortable working with those directors, find them.
Yeah.
It's like that. I'm just saying that who I'm comfortable working with,
Got it.
people who think like that. It's like that.
Yeah.
Two things that I want to. Benedict, would you want to add anything?
No. It's all very interesting. I agree with lots of it. Yeah.
No,
I do. Yeah. No.
You've been very quiet,
Lots of-
actually.
No, not at all. I like to listen,
Okay.
Learn a few
So-
words sometimes.
So two things I wanted to say about what Anand said. One is that this was this is something that a Bengali singer-songwriter said in Calcutta once. We were talking about something. So what he said was a song that it primarily needs a good tune. It may have bad or mediocre lyrics. So the thing that you were saying about poetry and lyrics, which Gulzar said, that song lyrics in movies or in whatever, maybe it can be something by a singer-songwriter or a band as well. They do not need to be poetry. It's not necessary they need to be poetry, but if it's poetic, that's a bonus. But the essential job of a song is to have a good tune. That's something that really struck with me. I don't know if you guys will agree with it. And something Anand said about score consumers being a certain bracket, and commercial song consumers being a certain bracket. So one thing that has happened with the internet is that when a score of Patal Lok is put up on the internet, or Sacred Games is put up on the internet, or Mirzapur, or the recent one, Scam 92, I see the comments on YouTube, and these guys are not listening to Radiohead or whatever, or Mozart, when they are not listening to this. They are your commercial song, what you call commercial song consumers. So one thing that is one good thing that has happened with YouTube and internet and all of these things is these boundaries have blurred. I mean, because of the internet today, these guys who earlier wouldn't have sought out a Naren and Benedict score. Now the Naren and Benedict music is reaching them, and they're suddenly like, whoa, I like this. And they want to listen to other music that sounds like them. So that's a great thing that is happening right now. Would you want to add anything before I move on to Naren's movie, The Disciple?
I think it's a small start. It hasn't become such a big section of the audience that listens to a score. So when the Mirzapur soundtrack was put out, there were about 90,000 comments about everything else but the music. And 10 comments about the music. No, not even season. Like random comments like, if you're reading this, your parents will live 100 years. Not joking. I'm not kidding. That's what's happening.
That's Indian internet.
Yeah. So anyway, carry on, Naren. Sorry, I just wanted to sort of
I was commenting on the first thing about lyrics and songs. I don't necessarily agree. I feel like there are songwriters like Leonard Cohen and Bob Dylan, for example, where I think the lyrics, I mean, not to say there's a common thing that Bob Dylan can't sing and his melodies aren't good. I think they're amazing. But
They're amazing.
the lyrics are certainly, on par, if not more, or at least when people talk about those singer-songwriters, they're talking more about their lyrics than the songs, than the melody.
No,
So I
but
think
every time a discussion like this happens, I always quote this one super commercial Bollywood song called Badtameez Dil.
Oh yeah.
So the lyrics absolutely make no sense, but Amitabh Bhattacharya won a Filmfare Award for it, and I think it's bloody genius. Like he was given a high energy song, and he was probably told to write anything or what, like literally anything, but it makes so much sense in the context of the song. It's bloody brilliant, and so like you said that the lyrics don't have to be poetic. I feel they do have to. Like if the lyricist sort of pushes his or her boundaries a little bit, they can achieve what the song demands, as well as the level of poetry required to make the lyrics stand out. Sorry to cut you again, Naren. Yeah. So,
No.
I mean, I think
Absolutely.
with all of these things is an important thing, and it's beyond the lyrics and the song and to the composer and the director. It's to do with also collaboration and distancing yourself from getting too emotionally attached to the one thing because you're making a greater whole or attempting to, and when that goes to public, if it's approved, you have made the best that you can make for that. So it's the best lyric or music that it can be for that one thing in its right place at that time. So I think it's quite important to keep that in mind when thinking about all this stuff, is that kind of slightly without taking away, without it's sort of enjoying the moment of saying, well, yeah, it's quite an interesting process to not necessarily align your full heart and soul with that one lyric at that time, because it doesn't need to do that. It needs to do this.
Yeah.
And there's your sort of challenge, which is kind of like, here's your Everest, go for it. It's damn difficult, in some ways. I think that's kind of interesting as well when you think about the fact that in classical music as well, when you think about the fact that so many, for hundreds of years, you would be paid a fee, and the count of whatever would own those 4-string quartets that were written for them, and they better like them, because if they don't like them, you're not going to get hired again. You know what I mean? And the symphony was paid for by such and such, and they kind of own that now. It's gone, and they want it on a certain date, and that date's happened and gone, and the concert's happening, and the composer would be going nuts in the front row because it's been hacked up, or whatever. So I think these are kind of, I quite like all that tension because I think that keeps us actually chomping at the bit, and you have it in live performance as well. You walk away, nothing's ever right. You know what I mean? It's might have been good, might have been something to be happy with, but it's always like it was right for that moment, for that time. And if it goes desperately wrong, that's a different thing to think about, I suppose. But anyway, that's a different conversation when things really go wrong. But I don't know.
I have a question for Aloka. Would you want to add anything?
No, I agree to all of them, or with all of them. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question for Benedict. So you've worked in India, you've worked for Indian productions, but you've also worked for British productions, and you have worked for theater.
Yeah, lots of theater.
Yeah. So could you talk about cultural differences of Indian filmmakers and British filmmakers aside? Can you talk about have you seen any noticeable kind of differences in approach to work, how they communicate with musicians, what they demand from musicians? Will you talk about that?
I mean, I don't know about what people could. I mean, I actually think I was thinking during a few minutes ago, actually, the one overriding feeling I've always had, having come to work in India for such a long time now, was the open-mindedness of people, and the sort of realization that actually you can meet people who are just as open or closed to music in any situation in any country. So I'm not sure really. I think that I've always kind of felt that, I don't know, I kind of feel that people are sort of the same all over the world in some ways. And some of the music that we all might be into, however left field it might be, I mean, you come across people you need to work with anywhere who may or may not be particularly interested in those areas. You know, it hasn't struck me as feeling very different in some ways. And mostly my experience in the UK is just with theatre, or my own music, which is largely just to sort of put ideas out into space. But all working in very, very avant-garde areas of free improvisation and stuff. So that's quite esoteric anyway. So when talking to people about some of my sort of favorite kind of ideas, most of them are going to bomb before they even get to the theatre space. You know, that's not gonna happen. But then maybe we find, I mean, I think that without backtracking too much, I think that Naren and I have had a lot of good fortune working with people who I've left as have been very open and said, show me something. And, you know, but also I think that the two of us have kind of found a way to have our experiments and work them in certain ways. Which are maybe not seen sometimes. You know, maybe you're hearing, and you guys all must do the same, where you're actually listening to something which is really out of the ordinary, but it's put in a very ordinary setting. I actually found that was kind of very similar anywhere that you are. Sorry, I'm not making a very clear point.
Yeah, I mean, just to touch upon what Bennett said, because we've also had a chance as a duo to work with directors who are based internationally, you know, like Canadian directors who had no relation whatsoever to Indian filmmaking. And within the indie space, especially, I think it's quite, other than some more practical elements with workflow and time management kind of stuff, the creative stuff it's kind of similar.
Yeah,
really.
Find that people are people, and actually, anywhere you go in some ways. I think we've also found that when you just take an idea and you make it objective, people can respond to it very well, whoever and wherever they are. Do you know what I mean? You can take an idea from Northern India and put it into Canada, or you can take an idea from Canada and put it into Northern India, and something from France and put it into Britain or whatever. And actually just hearing something isolated in its objective reality, I think can land or not land with anybody the same way the world over, actually.
Yeah. Anand, do you have...
And also I've heard some of the most fascinating and unusual sounding, for me, sonic properties coming from certain types of Indian music that we've been exposed to as well, and we've worked with in some of our ongoing work, you know, coming from certain types of traditional and folk music in India, which is, for me, very alien, beyond the sort of avant-garde free improvisation experimental scene, you know, that I'm used to. So it's kind of it's like I suppose anything it's only normal if you're used to it, and it can be fascinating. Anyway, sorry, you were saying something. Yeah.
So Anand had said that he was going to leave around 4. So do you have 5 minutes, Anand?
Yeah, I can wait 5 minutes.
Okay, so I have some questions for which I need Naren, Aloka, and Benedict, and some questions which I need all 4 of you. So I'll do that first. My 2 questions to all 4 of you, starting with Anand, is that music as a career, this is what I wrote. Music as a career can be, like any other creative career, can be creatively satisfying, which is very nice, but it can also be stressful. What are the things which non-musicians do not know or cannot even come to expect about making music? What are things about making music which non-musicians cannot expect at all? Like, you can go through something like this, or you can experience something like this.
And I think the first of all, I think the career in music is like a career in any other industry. You spend
Yeah.
10 years becoming a vice president, you become 10 years becoming a successful composer. It's just that. But the one thing that I feel is sort of, it sort of affects any freelancer, especially creators, is that our minds are active 24/7. I mean, I don't know if my mind goes to sleep when my body sleeps. And ever since I've taken up music full time, my sleep pattern has sort of become super disturbed. I haven't had like restful sleep. I have I have restful sleep like maybe once in a month when I'm like too tired. Yeah, because my mind is always constantly working. I mean, that's just for me. I don't know about you guys.
By the way, when you get musical ideas, what do you record it on? Do you have something to like quickly? Is it a phone or something?
Phone.
Okay, lovely.
Yeah.
And before you leave us, my question is the music that you liked a lot in the last 10 years in movie and television that
Hmm.
really blew your mind.
Oh man.
This is a selfish question. I'm trying to just, make my playlist good. So that's the idea.
uh, oh shit. Okay, you've put me in a spot and now I can't think of anything. uh, uh, okay, since Aloka is here, the score that I liked, one of the scores that I liked is Aloka's music from Sacred Games, especially the intro theme. And Ankit's channel had hosted the music for the series for quite some time because it wasn't available anywhere else. Um, Musically, I am a huge fan of Rahman sir and Amit Trivedi. So a lot of their music has really um, is something that I've really liked. Aside from that, internationally, there's just like a bunch of artists, like a bunch of art. I've recently gotten into this new. It's not new so much. It's like come up in the last 2-3 years, which is like lo-fi, neo soul, electronic, like really really cleanly produced music with some great vocals. Uh, so there's an artist called Noah Slee, which I really like. Noahslee. He's like a really good artist. There's an artist called Jordan Rake. Leonard Cohen, like Naren said, brilliant artist. Then I discovered this artist called Alexi Murdoch. His music is amazing. So yeah, I like a bunch of artists like this. Film scores wise, I don't remember the titles of the films whose scores I liked, but there's like a bunch of films on that list as well.
Okay. So Anand, will you be leaving now?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Thank you for joining, being part of this. It
Thank
was
you
lovely to
for
have you.
thank you for
Thanks,
having
man.
me on board, guys. Thank you for sorry for leaving abruptly, but you guys continue. I'm sure you guys will have a great session. So bye.
Thanks,
Have a
man.
good one.
See you, man.
Bye, Naren. Bye, Benedict. Bye, Loka.
See you, man. Bye, bye.
Bye. There.
Hi guys, I just have a couple of more questions before we wrap this up in another 20 minutes. Um, so about disciples, finally. So I know that I haven't seen the movie, but I spoke to the filmmaker about how the music was made. So the reason that I want to talk about this with all of you, I'm getting to that. So what I know is that Anish Pradhan,
Yeah.
he sorted what rag and what all the musicians need to play from scene to scene. And you, I forgot you had this very strange job description on the movie. I forgot, music designer, I think,
No,
something.
no, no, no. That was Anish Pradhan, the music designer.
Okay.
So actually, on The Disciple, I didn't really work as a musician at all.
Yeah, could you talk about that?
No, I
So
was
you
a
were a
sound
sound
designer.
designer. Ah.
Yeah, yeah. So I did the
So
sound design. There's some tiny bits of music here and there, which there was more like little snippets of stuff, which I'd helped put together. But I'd helped with the recording of the recording process, and otherwise it was purely sound design.
okay, so because of my misunderstanding or my correct understanding, I don't know, of what I read about the music of Disciple, I was reminded of the music of this Russian movie. It's by Andrei Tarkovsky. The movie is called Stalker. So there the music of the movies kind of blends with the sound design, and that's a thing that's there in a lot of Tarkovsky movies, but most memorably in Stalker. And it's also there in recent times. It has also happened with the scores of Trent Reznor, particularly the Dragon Tattoo movie.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about have you guys done projects in which the music became a part of the sound design of the movie? It kind of mixed with the ambient sound. Have you guys done projects like this?
I think quite a few of them actually.
Mm.
And like you were saying, there is a thing with textural scores, and textural scores, when you do one, really allows for that to happen in a very nuanced way. I just like to point out, though, in The Disciple, that is not the case at all. When there's music, and it's like Hindustani classical music, which is as far as you can get from the Trent Reznor type mixed with sound design kind of thing. Here, it's very clear, distinct choices. But yeah, I mean, Bennett, what would you? I think there are quite a few of them. I mean, I'd say like elements in a lot of films where we've done that.
Yeah, lots of them.
Gurgaon,
Gurgaon, for
Theseus,
sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Patal Lok as well.
I think it
Ghoul,
kind of creeps
all over the
into
place, yeah.
many spaces in many of the projects we've done in some ways.
Yeah.
But that's also why I was talking a bit earlier about the idea that when we were allowed the freedom to say, make a very sudden melody, it kind of also comes out as a stark difference, because a lot of the stuff is interwoven with sound and with that kind of zone as well. Yeah, it's an interesting area.
I think in Aloka's case, it happened most predominant, most like visibly or audibly actually, with Trapped. Could you talk about? I mean, I'm sure you have talked about this a lot, but could you talk about how the score of Trapped, the bits which used physical sounds like construction sounds and all of that, how that was worked into the sound design of the film? Could you talk about that?
Actually speaks a lot. I mean, again, Anish John's sound, it is a complete marriage to the music, and he knows music so well that he can manipulate sound enough to make it a score as well. So that's the importance of sound in music. And in Sacred Games, this has happened as well. But Trapped, again, it worked. I don't know the method to the madness, but it worked because I was in a really weird state of mind. I have a condition where, too much noise gets me like really crazy. I mean, with everyone it does, but for me, I don't know, it's psychological. I feel like I'm breaking into rashes or something. So I moved to a place on the 10th floor to stay away from noises. But the day I moved, there was construction on the opposite side, and there was construction below my apartment. Somebody was making a false ceiling. So there was drilling sounds and constructions all the time, and I was going nuts, absolutely nuts. So I had an H4 Zoom digital recorder, a field recorder that was my first purchase from teaching piano a long time back. So I used that and I recorded things, and it sounds really romantic. It wasn't. I was actually going nuts. I would go down, yell at the owner, come up, record, go down, yell, come up, record. So I just ended up recording a lot of noise and sounds, and then Trapped happened, and it was similar. The person was also trapped in a house and couldn't get out. So somehow the mental, this is where, again, I'm not deviating, but as a composer, personally, this is where really I know you have to detach yourself, which is, I need lessons of that more. But this is where really, when the film speaks to you, really speaks to you, it just becomes easier, as simple as that. So it spoke to me in a way that I just used all of I just morphed them, manipulated all of the things that I recorded, added things like clang, pots and pans and water droplets and all of it. And it just happened. It worked. And it worked musically. So that was a very, it doesn't always happen. You can't always, it's not always life imitate art sort of a situation. But in that case, kind of my mind worked. My state of mind with the film state of mind, with the noises, all of them worked. Of course, there was a lot I had to do with the recordings. I just couldn't use what I recorded. but it was fun. It seemed like I'm doing something constructive with something destructive, and I think it worked with the mood of the film. And Anish also did a amazing job of it. So yeah.
Coming to my favorite question, actually. So, during the pandemic, everybody is working from home, and a lot of people. So, for the past 2.5, 3 years, actually, I had been working primarily from home, and I think working from home is actually underrated. And I think you guys, Naren and Benedict, as far as I know, you guys have seldom been in the studio together, and a lot of what you do happens in your rooms or happens in your studios, and you pass on, music to get your work done. Aloka, I know that she loves her, at least in the conversations, that's what I have understood. She loves her space and she likes to make a work from there. So my question to you is, number one, how important is your space or your cave, working cave, creative cave, however you put it, to your music? And my second question is, some musicians are extremely good in the recording studio and some musicians are extremely good live, and very few are both. So is being good in the studio and being good in live, is that a matter of skill or is it a matter of temperament? So these are my two questions.
With the studio and live, I don't perform. I haven't really performed live very much as a musician. So that would be something Bennett could answer a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Go on,
Just with
sorry.
with Bennett and I working, we've been in the studio together quite a lot for some
lot,
projects.
yeah.
But yeah, there's also
times,
been a
yeah.
lot of writing from distance. So yeah, I mean, in some ways, working from home and in also with a musical, I don't know, working as a composer, pre-pandemic and post-pandemic in terms of workflow has not really changed very much. You're mostly
Yeah,
isolated
exactly.
anyways.
Welcome to our world, everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like writers have been sharing those memes as well. It's very similar for music composers.
Yeah.
Like not much has changed except for everything
Yeah.
outside of actually working, which
Mhm.
obviously affects work in many ways, in huge ways. But yeah, and the cave, musical cave, whether it's in a studio or when I'm working from home, is very important for me. Whether it's an absolute mess or it's very clearly ordered, both have their merits and demerits. But yeah, that's where you spend, I think, the majority of your waking and sleeping time sometimes. So yeah, it helps a lot to have it just the way you like it.
Benedict,
Mhm.
as he said, you have performed frequently live, and we all know
Yeah.
that some bands are extremely good on in the final master, which you listen, but they are not as good in live. So so the question I was asking, is it a matter of skill or is it a matter of temperament?
I suppose it could be a bit of both. I mean, I think that as a performer coming from a classical string playing point of view, you learn to do both. You learn that the concert time is the concert time, and that's when you switch from the conversation we're just having to focus and play it in tune. In the same way with the studio technique, you kind of learn that technique very intensively at music college. You know, you have to but that's kind of maybe that's a bit different from the performance stuff where if personally I have to go and perform my own music or much more of a personal kind of music with other people, less being required to turn up and perform certain things, which I do in different, so it's sort of different hats, I suppose. I'm not sure. I mean, a varying temperament can potentially ruin a performance or a studio session. I suppose. Yeah, and I'm not sure. I think it's a bit of both. But I think I would have thought you learn the skill, but part of that skill is controlling your temperament.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
You know, it's like if you get to the concert platform and have a hissy fit, you know, that's, you know, you might be the greatest pianist in the world, but too bad, you know, and you won't be back at whatever next year, you know. So I'm not sure. I think you learn those things, and then you do it sort of day in, day out. So it's like it's kind of a daily normal process, and the studio feels Mm.
Yeah,
Right.
I think there's sometimes, sorry, Alokananda, carry on.
No, I was just saying very, very well said. Part of the skill is controlling the temperament. It's
Mm.
very well said.
Mm.
I think there's sometimes this romanticization. I don't know. It's a very personal thing of the artist, and I think there's a very similar thing to music as it is to doing any kind of skill, whether it's woodworking or running or anything. And that just has primarily the temperament and everything comes from the skill and from the hours and from the riyaz and from the practice and doing it day in and day out for a long time. It's very much just a craft like anything else, And obviously people are born with certain things that they're just better at other people with, or they're born with temperaments that may help them. But there are people who weren't born with those temperaments who got that through just hard work. And I think ultimately that's what really shapes someone. And I also just in terms of that, I also don't really agree with this thing of like musicians sometimes being better live and better in the studio. I think that's sometimes seen as too polarizing. I think with like famous bands that were famous for it, for example, like Red Hot Chili Peppers or Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin were famously bad at a certain point of time live, and that really had to do more with their drug habits and alcohol consumption than anything else, than their skill. And perhaps you could put that onto temperament. But the point was more with something like the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I don't think the Red Hot Chili Peppers were ever a band that was made to sing in tune. You know what I mean? It's like a very punk, that kind of ethos. It's not like, hey, you don't judge the Red Hot Chili Peppers by saying, oh, wow, they were pitch perfect. It's more about a ethos of like going there with just socks on and like belting it out with like all of the energy that they could bring on that specific Friday or Wednesday or whatever it was. And that's the driving force behind it. So you can't like pigeonhole people into that was good live. There may be people in the mosh pit of that concert, someone in the back, sipping a cup of tea is like, no, that note was off. It's a bad concert. While someone in the mosh pit is having the time of their life. I think it changes from like, I don't know.
I was there once.
In the mosh pit?
Yeah, it was brilliant. Couldn't hear a thing, Anyway, sorry.
Aloka, do you want to say anything? Actually, I have another question. I'd forgotten that I would want to like talk about this as well. But before that, do you want to say anything, Aloka?
No, I mean, my father wanted me to be a classical pianist, and that crashed and banged and failed and how. So just like Benedict said, it's a bit of both. I spent half my life rehearsing in a room all by myself, and being petrified of one examiner and my skills being judged. And I also don't have good nerves. I don't have nerves of steel. So that's where temperament also comes, and I've tried to improve it. But basically, I'm not a performer. The day I realized that and made peace with it, that I shouldn't try to be a performer, I also kind of freeze. So I've never jammed, I've never played jazz, I've never played in a band, I've never jammed with people. So that's something that I kind of I feel better off by myself alone when I'm doing something. So yeah, it's a bit of both. I don't have the skills, neither do I have the temperament to perform live. So yeah, I agree with what the two of them said.
My last question is about the cello. So there's a lot of cello in Aloka's music, and there's quite a bit of it in Naren Benedict's music. My question might seem funny, but here it is. Can you make happy music with cello? Because
Yes.
can you talk about because all the cello music I'm coming across in films and TV, it's very like morbid and sad, which is not a bad thing. But I was just wondering, like, would you?
I think if you watched any romantic comedy, there is a lot of cello pizzicato in there that is very happy and saccharinely happy. So you can definitely make a cello.
Yeah. Or Bach first suite.
I was about to say,
the cello suites, That's, I think it's treatment, but it does have a wonderful sonorous tone, which can so be aptly associated with
melancholy,
and pensive elements.
It's like the sarangi, I guess.
Yeah,
but it's I agree. There's a lot of it's just by nature, by personality, the cello is associated with somber. It just pulls on your heartstrings. But of course, it's still you can make happy music. I mean, there's Brahms double concerto second movement. It's actually, I think it's a scherzo. It's a kind of a joke, or I don't remember, which was this absolutely, you would want to get up and dance to it, and it's violin and cello. So I don't think you can, again, there can be a lot of happy music with cello. Maybe, yeah, maybe look it
I
up.
think there's some.
Again, it's,
Sorry, carry on.
well, I guess that association of, like, I mean, I think anything can be, you can make. I mean, I before I knew a little bit about India, I didn't realize that the sarangi was perhaps had that mournful thing. It was just that because you hear things very differently. I mean, any instrument can be used for any purpose depending how you treat it.
Yeah.
Personally, I think.
Of course. Yeah.
I think there's also, in a very fundamental way, sometimes just people see lower pitches being sadder than higher pitches. So an instrument that has a lower pitch range, I don't know. I'm just jumping off something. But I've just noticed that sometimes with people listening to things, that's seen as like low equals a little lower, literally.
I just want some composer to try making angry music with xylophone. I would like to.
You can have some really dissonant music with a xylophone.
I
If
know
you
that.
bore, and if you bore
Yeah.
a xylophone, that can sound pretty wild and pretty angry as well.
Okay. I
Sounds really
think.
cool.
Yeah, it sounds cool. So I think that's all the time we have. Thank you, Aloka, Benedict,
Yes,
Naren.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Some angry music. More. Thank you so much. Great
Thank you.
talking to you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
You too. Bye.
You too.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye.